we have Gulam, Senior Executive Director at Knight Frank India, to talk to me and my colleague Anushri Bukharia, who closely tracks the real estate space, about what's happening with real estate at the moment, what has happened, and what will happen, hopefully. Welcome, sir. I would first want to know, of course, Anushri will help me dive deeper into this, but my first and very forefront question to you would be that we have noticed that there has been a change in trend of the demand in the real estate sector, where premium housing, luxury housing has taken, like there's more favor and favoritism towards these segments. What do you think, how could governments push towards affordable housing, help big real estate giants like Brigade and Lodha Group, make houses for the middle class as well?
Thank you so much, first of all, to call me on this platform, and a good afternoon to you and your viewers. It's a very, this question is discussed all over. Last, I would say, a couple of months, everybody's talking about why affordable housing is not where the top developers yet focusing. Somewhere in October, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, in its new avatar, 2.0 as they call it, was launched in 2024 October. And after that, the new scheme has come out with lots of initiatives to ensure that affordable housing market is bouncing back. However, while government is doing enough and more to ensure a level playing field and to attract developers into that domain, government itself has promised to construct 1.24 crore houses in next 5 years block for the PMA 2.0 to be active. Now that still leaves almost about equal amount of houses to be created by private players. So that number is huge. If you look at next 5 years block, you will need about 2.5 odd crore houses. That's the demand for affordable housing. Now developers are not yet coming on block for a simple reason. For them it's the low-hanging fruits. And as you started saying that, the upper end of the market is selling so beautifully. They are actually, the velocity of sales was so good. The price appreciation is fabulous. And hence, in last 3 years especially, developers have launched enough of inventory in mid to upper category of the sector. And that is a problem, because if you are selling something in a particular segment, your attention is drawn to something where questions are still there. You will be bringing in lots of inventory. But that segment for last 3 to 4 odd years, or in fact more, almost about 5 years, that sector is lying low, kind of dormant. I'm talking about affordable housing. So there is a clear, it's writing on the wall that for developers to move into affordable housing, the upper end has to slow down. For them to realize that there is more business beyond upper end housing, and till such time that's not happening, I don't see much of a possibility of the listed developers or the organized players to focus on affordable housing. In the interim, the focus will remain on the upper end of the market.
Yeah, considering that the main impetus for the listed developers is on the premium and the uber luxury side, considering the kind of demands and the pricing realizations that we've been seeing, what is the trajectory going forward that you see for the top end of the market, how their share would pan out in the next coming, say, 1 to 2 years, and how the affordable, do you see the market share of this continue to see a decline overall? Just wanted to get your sense of the numbers if we go for the near-term picture.
Okay, so if we need to slice and dice and understand various layers of housing segments, what we spoke about, that the uber luxury end, the premium end is doing fabulously well, is still intact. The problem is in the mid end of the upper end, if I have to explain, houses priced from 20 crore to 50 crore is a segment where a lot of supply has come in, but the demand actually is not as much, and especially velocity of sale is affected so much that this is the only segment where the time taken to absorb whatever inventory in the market is going to be almost about 5 years. The upper end, above 50 crore, is a segment where still in 2 years, whatever inventory is there, you will absorb all of that. But this is one segment, which is, 20 to 50 crore segment, where the velocity is a lot to something to worry about. And that is where the first sign of crack is appearing. While developers are talking about a little slowdown in both conversion as well as new inquiries knocking their doors, there's a slowdown. But the velocity of sales has continued in other segments except for the one which I spoke about, even 2 crore to 5 crore, 5 to 20 crore segment has also been doing fairly well because the velocity of sales or time taken to absorb all the inventory in the market basis the last 10 quarters of a rolling average of velocity of sales would still not be more than 2 to 3 years, which is a comforting zone. The only thing is the upper end, the middle end of the upper side of the society of the segment, which is showing cracks, but cracks nonetheless. So my point is, while many of them have already started, writing that the sector is on a slowdown, I would say we need to wait and watch a little, maybe a quarter or two, to see how velocity of sales are shaping up in next 2 to 3 months, 4 months, and then come to a conclusion. In the interim, the business is as usual, except for one or two segments, which is very specific. Everywhere else, the business, the velocity of sales are going on as usual. So the long-term perspective, another 3 to 4 months or 5 months when you and I would sit together to look at what's happening out there, basis solid data. I don't want to go by the anecdotes that the people are quoting. Basis solid data, I will tell you, if in long term the perspective is changing, developers would, in that event, start looking at affordable housing if there is any slowdown in mid to upper end.
So, Mr. Zia, my follow-up question, just to understand what you've told me better, is do you see that the gap between these different segments of housing would increase or merge in the future? And the reason why I'm asking you about affordable housing is because there's substantial push from the government's end as well, especially if you go back in tier 2 and tier 3 cities. The demand for affordable housing is concrete and it is high. It is very much in demand. But we don't see private players pushing themselves to make affordable houses for various reasons. Do you think because of rising disposable income and rising demand in urban cities due to a rise in the lifestyle of people, the gap between luxury housing and affordable housing would increase in the near term or even in the long run?
Well, it has already increased. If you have to look at, of course, reasons, a lot of reasons, the stock exchange was the major reason. Equity markets outperforming everything else for last 2 odd years was the reason. But that is one single big reason which has actually changed. In last 2 to 3 months, we are looking at serious distress from the equity side. So a lot of wealth creation that had happened in stock exchanges was actually driven into housing and especially mid to upper end of the housing. And that is what was showing. But you're absolutely right, in times to come, that gap which had widened a lot. I will give you some data again. About 4 years back, overall market size, almost 2/3 used to be affordable housing and only 1/3 was mid to upper end. But in last 4 odd years, the markets have changed drastically. And currently, not even 25% of the share of the overall market pie is cornered by affordable housing. And that's a big gap. The gap that you're talking about is right here, huge gap. Now, going forward, as I said, since the signs are actually there that the markets are going to change, I want to believe developers would once again start looking into affordable housing, because all these big players that you spoke about were all there, all of them were there in affordable housing. But in last 4 to 5 years, they pulled out, focusing all their energies on mid to upper end. But as the game is changing again and the gap is widening, they will once again start looking at affordable housing. But in the interim, while developers are talking about re-looking at their strategies about the market, but time will tell. Another 6 months is crucial to understand whether this gap will widen further, which I don't believe. I believe this gap will actually shrink and things will change in favor of affordable housing in next year, year and a half. But in the interim, mid to upper end is what sells like hotcake.
Okay, that was quite comprehensive. Mr. Zia, I'll try to club a couple of questions together now. Now, what we've seen is Nifty Realty has been one of the top sectoral laggards for this year. We've seen about a 20% of a drop already. Now, there have been concerns in terms of where the approvals are. Regulatory challenges have been present on the upper end of the side. Many companies would maybe fail to maintain their FY25 guidance given as per the launches. So what we are looking at is in terms of absorption that we are seeing a little bit of slowdown. So considering slower absorption, regulatory challenges being there in terms of approvals coming in, what is the picture that we'll see forward in the next, say, maybe like next 1 to 2 years for the real estate? Does the demand continue to be healthy, or there are chances of now supply increasing more? How would that impact the pricing growth forward, considering that inventories, as you've pointed out in your reports as well, are still on the lower side or remain at multi-year lows?
To start with, at a very macro level, I want to make a point that approvals is never a problem. Even if you say that it takes time, it's very usual, very normal. In fact, developers have their way of ensuring that the approvals are coming faster. But that's, to me, it's not a concern at all. On the other side, it's purely the demand-supply economics that we have to look at. Currently, the demand is intact. The way the sales, velocity of sales, I said, we always catch the last 10 years rolling averages and the last 10 quarters rolling averages. And those rolling averages are still talking about a very favorable side of picture for developers. Going forward, things are expected to change, and primarily the reason remains that whatever is happening, the bloodshed in equity markets is something which will have an impact on real estate as well, albeit in a slightly with a lag of about a quarter or two. And that is already, a lot of people are talking about it, but it is anecdotal, so I don't want to go much into it. Data says that times to come, things may slow down, but in the interim, you spoke about prices. Well, in last 2 years, the prices have actually been increasing a lot, almost 7 to 8% on an average growth. But on the other side, the projects which are in demand from good developers, reputed players, the price growth per annum was as much as 25-30% per annum as well, which is crazy. But then that's usual, because when you look at the whole 10-12 odd year of cycle, in a year or two, prices going at that rate is not bad, because otherwise you would see 3-4%, 5% growth, which is, if you consider inflation, it is net negative. So this 20-25% is not, again, much to sing and dance about. But overall, the price rise has been reaching that above the circuit breaker kind of things, where affordability is a concern. We're already reaching there. So price rise, I don't believe that you shall see more of price rise in times to come. Prices will remain stable. And as I said earlier as well, another quarter or two we have to watch, and we may see things changing, where the upper end of the market will definitely show slowdown, and mid to lower end shall come to rescue of the industry, of the sector, where developers quickly have to change their focus, come back into affordable housing. And that's a huge market. The demand there is intact. As I spoke about, in 5 years, you're going to look at 2.5 odd crore of housing requirement. So there is enough for every developer that exists today in listed or organized play. And then, as I said, price rise is already stabilized. It's ultimately going to be how do they quickly change the stance, get into affordable housing, and continue their business as usual.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gulam Zia, for joining us and having this conversation and giving us such a holistic picture of the real estate market at the moment.